Hi, everybody. My name is Ambaree, and I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Marina City in Singapore, District 3310. And I'm also the co chair of the Plant Rich Diet Task Force under the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. Today, I want to talk to you about our oceans, as the name of my talk suggests. And I will touch upon how our current eating habits and patterns might be a key contributor to what is happening to our oceans. Now, I've constantly felt that the kind of attention that our oceans need has always been underplayed to some extent in comparison to other climate causes. Although beach cleanups might be happening at various places, which is a great thing, but what we might want to ask ourselves as environmentally conscious citizens is that if we are cleaning up beaches to save marine life, then is there anything else that we might be doing which could be contributing to large scale marine decimation? In my presentation today, I want to break down why our oceans, which is one of the vastest, oldest, self standing natural systems of our planet, suddenly needs our help. Before I bring up facts and statistics, I want to take a minute to explain why environmental sustainability, or the chances of survival of life itself on the planet, is a direct and immediate consequence of what happens to our oceans and marine ecosystems in the future. To start with, I want to mention the not so obvious but indispensable services that oceans provide for us, because it is often presumed that the most prominent job of oceans is to provide us with seafood, which is really a self centered way of thinking and is obviously untrue. Number one, between 50 to 80% of atmospheric oxygen that we breathe is actually produced by our oceans. The surface layer of the ocean is teeming with photosynthetic plankton. Though they are invisible to the naked eye, they produce more oxygen than the largest redwoods that we have on our planet. One other environment regulatory activity that our oceans bear is that they absorb more than 90% of the excess heat generated by global warming, because ocean water has a remarkably high heat capacity. But as the oceans become warmer, it is expected that hurricanes and rainfall will also become more powerful. So our marine bodies provide key service of climate regulation like energy budgeting, carbon sequestering, and carbon and nutrient cycling. What I'm trying to highlight here is that our oceans and the ecosystems that they support are way more important for our survival than just a source of fish and seafood. Now, let's look at how the very complex and robust systems that function within the oceans are being disrupted by human interferences. Plastic, mercury pollution, marine ecosystem destruction, etc., are grave issues that are causing threats of immense scale to our oceans. But the biggest and common threat that all of these anthropogenic activities are causing is that all of them are either on purpose or collaterally damaging our vastest ecosystem by killing marine life. Now, we know that we cannot survive without functioning oceans, and the oceans are in danger, and we obviously want to save them. Let's see what we want to achieve when we step out to save the oceans and solve these problems. So, no matter what activity we might be involved in, whether it is to reduce our dependence on plastic, reducing waste, and lessening our consumption of harmful chemicals, or anything else, when we say that we want to save the oceans, it essentially means that we want to save the inhabitants of the ocean. So basically, in order for us to have thriving oceans, we need to make sure that all the species of living beings, plants and animals in the oceans are safe, that the population of each of these species is not higher or lower than what is needed for everyone's natural life cycles to function optimally. Today, we will be looking at that one industry which has the most widespread human activity at the oceans and is directly participating in decimating marine life. You probably can guess that I'm coming to the practice of fishing. Now, humans ate fish and other aquatic animals since prehistoric days, and we have much archaeological evidence about that. In fact, one of the reasons why humans would settle near water sources would be because they would be assured of food around there. When fishing primarily happened that way, meaning the traditional way, it never put our oceans in danger, because those would literally be a drop in the ocean, meaning oceans have always been too vast a resource for such small scale fishing methods to create a dent in them. That way of fishing did not cause issues like overfishing, bycatches, and ghost nets, which are prevalent in the way fish is caught today. They rather gave a livelihood to those who probably were traditional fishermen for generations. So, what has happened now? What has changed now? The practice that has complicated this entire process and dynamics today is the modern day industrialized fishing, which functions on a scale that is completely unsustainable, even by the vastest ecosystem that we have on our planet, which is our oceans. This way of fishing is referred to as commercial fishing, which is a multinational, multi-billion-dollar industry that has been depleting fish population and other marine life and the overall marine environment for decades, driving many species towards extinction. So, how do we define commercial fishing? As the name suggests, it is just fishing for making commercial profit. When it comes to doing business solely for profit, other elements like competition, cost, targets, productivity, profitability come into the picture, and the well being of the oceans takes a comfortable backseat or is totally ignored like it never mattered. Like every business that wants to make economic profit, the commercial fishing industry also focuses mainly on maximizing profitability and minimizing cost, which is all right. But the methods and practices that are employed by the commercial fishing industry cause our oceans to pay a heavy price because they relentlessly try to meet the unsustainable and skyrocketing global demand for fish and seafood. In the course of keeping up with supply for this kind of a demand, the colossal rate and scale at which fishing is done using factory ships the size of football fields is causing an underwater havoc and bringing us close to a marine catastrophe, or in other words, a complete climate breakdown. Now, more than half the seafood that we consume today is wild caught or is a product of commercial fishing. This is a video that shows two of the most popular commercial fishing methods. One is bottom trawling, and the other one is long line fishing. Let's take a look at how they're employed and the kind of impact they have on our oceans.
When it comes to wild fish, the two main methods of catching fish are bottom trawling and longline fishing. Bottom trawling is a method of fishing that involves dragging heavy weighted nets across the sea floor in an effort to catch fish. It is a popular method in commercial fishing because it can catch large quantities of fish in one go. However, when dragging the large weighted nets across the seafloor, everything that happens to be in the way gets swept up in the nets too, leading to huge amounts of bycatch and also the damaging of the sea floor, which creates harmful algae blooms and oxygen-deficient dead zones. Longline fishing is where fishing vessels trail huge lines of nets through the oceans, with hundreds or even thousands of baited hooks attached along the nets. These nets can be as long as 50 to 100 kilometers. Similar to bottom trawling, the lines are indiscriminate, meaning that bycatch is also a huge issue. With every year around 650,000 whales, dolphins, seals, sea lions and turtles being killed because of the fishing industry, which equals more than one every minute. And some estimates said it could be as many as double this number. On top of that, it is estimated that 50 million sharks are unintentionally caught as bycatch each year, which is about half as many as are killed intentionally for their meat and fins. Yet, why is it then that we look in horror at those who eat shark fin soup, when our consumption of fish is also responsible for the mass killing of tens of millions of sharks every single year?
So, just to give you a bit more depth to what commercial fishing is, bottom trawling and almost all other commercial fishing methods have several severe primary, secondary, and tertiary environmental repercussions, as you can see here. The United Nations estimates that up to 95% of global ocean damage is a direct result of bottom trawling. When a thriving underwater ecosystem is bottom trawled, the ocean floor is left with absolutely nothing but copious signs of violation and damage. The indiscriminate mopping off of the ocean floors by factory sized trawlers with immensely heavy weighted nets causes many non target animals to get caught as well, in addition to the incredibly high number of fish that get swept off, leading to many of them, like turtles, sharks, stingrays, dolphins, which have important and indispensable ecological roles to play, to be at a threat of extinction. And this problem of bycatches and thus contributing to marine wildlife plummeting is true for almost all commercial fishing methods. Continuing with the problem of bycatches, according to an article by Worldwide Fund for Nature, in total, 38 million tons of sea creatures are unintentionally caught every year. That is 40% of fish catch worldwide. A large amount of this is either thrown back into the sea as rubbish, dead, dying, or seriously injured, or disposed of on land. For some species, it is even more. For example, for 1 kilo of shrimp, 5 to 20 kilos of bycatch can be found in the nets. Shrimp trawlers discard 60 to 80% of their catch, making their business an extremely environmentally destructive practice. What alarms next is the carbon emissions caused by a previously overlooked source, which again is bottom trawling. So, bottom trawling is practiced extensively by dozens of countries around the world, including the United States, China, as well as the EU. According to groundbreaking calculations done by 26 authors from around the world, it is reported in Nature that bottom trawling is responsible for 1 gigaton of carbon emissions a year, a higher annual total than pre pandemic aviation emissions. Carbon of this huge quantity is released from the seabed sediment into the water that aggravates ocean acidification as well as adversely affects productivity as well as biodiversity, the study said. This is because marine sediments are the largest pool of carbon storage in the world. The third point that needs our attention is the compelling issue of abandoned fishing nets and gears called ghost nets, which float across oceans. Thousands of kilometers of fishing nets are abandoned or lost in the ocean waters every year by the fishing industry. Again, protected animals like dolphins, sharks, turtles, sea lions get entangled and injured by these nets and hooks, and they eventually either die of asphyxiation or starvation. A report by World Animal Protection called Ghosts Beneath the Waves describes the catastrophic impact of ghost gears on our oceans and mentions that 45% of all the threatened marine mammals have been either killed or harmed by abandoned fishing gear. That's the photo of a sea turtle who was found in this state, struggling to set itself free from fishing nets by an underwater photographer in 2019 around Barcelona. Therefore, picking up plastic materials from the beaches that are visible to us is a good effort to save marine biodiversity. But it might be a myopic approach to solving the overall ocean plastic problem if we fail to address what is happening to the marine animals in the pelagic or open sea areas because of thousands of miles of plastic fishing nets abandoned and lost by the commercial fishing trawlers. Now, coming to the core issue about commercially caught wild fish, which is overfishing. There is often an assumption in our minds that there is plenty of fish in the oceans, which was true actually till a few decades back. But now there is a rampant problem of overfishing. So, what is overfishing? Ocean overfishing is simply the taking of wildlife from the sea at rates too high for fished species to replenish themselves. The facts about worldwide overfishing, which is highly disruptive to the food chain, are surprising and alarming. For example, almost 90% of uh, predatory fish stocks have been targeted, causing a terrible disruption at the top position of the food chain. And most of the fish that we consume are predatory in nature, like tuna and salmon. Now, let's talk about a proposed solution to all the threats that commercial fishing poses on the oceans and see how effective they are for the oceans. Although, in theory, farmed fish, seafood, or aqua farming is often championed as the sustainable solution to the problem of overfishing and overexploitation of the oceans. But the truth is that intensive fish farming has many negative consequences for the environment and the coastal communities. Firstly, the way fish are farmed and housed is not hygienic, and it causes excessive overcrowding in the fish pens. Because of overcrowding, fish often injure themselves, get sick, and fall victim to parasites more easily. To counter these effects, fish farmers rely on antibiotics and pesticides which contaminate the water. Wastewater is overloaded with food residue, antibiotics, and excrement, creating oxygen depleted zones or dead zones due to algae blooms in the natural environment around the farm sites. Secondly, due to large releases of nitrogen and phosphorus and fecal matter into the waters, this kind of intensive farming has been seen to damage the coastal environment by causing eutrophication and acidification of the water. Globally, up until the 1917 and 80s, it was not very obvious that dissolved oxygen would become critical in brackish and shallow coastal systems. It is much later when large areas of low dissolved oxygen started to appear with associated mass mortalities of invertebrate and fishes. Thirdly, coastal ecosystems are often completely destroyed in order to make room for intensive aquaculture. This is the case with the artificial ponds created to farm tropical shrimp in particular. Mangroves are chopped down, leading to the disappearance of all the species that take shelter in the trees, uh, like oysters, birds, and more. This also implicates the removal of a strong and natural barrier against storms and tsunamis. Another example of why aquaculture is not an effective environmental solution is the problem of fish feed, which remains a thorn for the aquaculture industry. Known in the industry as forage fish, species lower down in the food chain can be such as sardines, anchovies, and crustaceans like krill are turned into fish meal and fed to farmed fish, which contributes to unstable fish populations. Billions of small wild fish need to be caught to feed all the farmed predatory fish, giving rise to an aggressive cycle of excessive fishing. According to the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, it takes 5 pounds of ocean fish to produce just 1 pound of farmed salmon. So, here as well, you see a tremendous inefficiency in calorie conversion. Such a high demand for fish meal is leading to overexploitation of the small forage fish, a staple of the local diet traditionally caught by artisanal fishermen and smoked and dried by women. The decline in fish stocks is causing food insecurity, job losses in the local artisanal sector, as well as environmental damage and public health hazards in the areas where fish meal plants are installed due to contamination that gets generated. Therefore, the impact of aquaculture on wild fish stocks remains largely contentious at the moment, given the finite nature of global marine resources. The sector's overdependence on fish meal and trash fish for feed opens it to several ecological risks. In fact, being the leading farmed fish producer in the world, the development of China's aquaculture sector offers striking evidence that aquaculture in its current form has not only failed to restore fish stocks domestically, but also emerged as a contributor to diminishing wild fish stocks worldwide. So, when the environmentally conscious consumer were unhappy with the severe environmental implications caused by the commercial fishing industry and aquaculture industry, a new solution was brought in to keep encouraging them to continue buying seafood labeled as sustainable seafood. What is sustainable seafood? Sustainable seafood is seafood that comes in packaging claiming that its content is certified sustainable. It means that the fish were declared as sustainably caught by either an organization private company, or government agency. Basically, sustainable seafood means that the fishery claims to be making efforts to kill fish in a manner and rate that did not cause overfishing, helped rebuild depleted stocks, minimized bycatches and interactions with protected species, and conserve essential fish habitats. But requirements to get a sustainable seafood certification from the varying entities differ. Popular sustainable seafood labels have different standards for fisheries to qualify to use its label on packaging, which can be confusing to the consumer, to say the least. You can check out their websites for more information on how they evaluate these fisheries. Whatever the measures may be, it is important to remember, like I mentioned before, like any other industry, the fishing industry exists primarily for economic reasons and not to protect the future of the oceans. If protecting the oceans was a top priority for these companies, then they would do more than simply alter their fishing practices to be just a little bit more sustainable. Their will to protect the oceans would be clearly visible in their actions, where they would stop using these commercial fishing methods entirely. So, the question to ponder over is whether we as consumers are being lured to pay more to buy sustainable seafood only as a feel good factor with no real and convincing environmental accountability. Is this yet another greenwashing technique to keep the truth hidden from us? In conclusion about the oceans, I would like to simplify my presentation and bring the salient points back that I just spoke about. Firstly, we need to understand the obvious. That is, to save the planet, we need to save the oceans. Captain Paul Watson, a marine ecologist, once said, "If the oceans die, we all die." So the oceans and their inhabitants are among our greatest allies in the fight against climate change. Therefore, let us come together to protect the oceans and not exhausted like a bottomless resource of unbelievable amounts of fish and seafood being pulled out at ridiculous rates and scales. Second, we need to understand that saving our oceans essentially means taking action to restore the marine biodiversity to ensure least disruption in the way marine plants and animals function in tandem with one another. Third, the first step towards solving a problem, any problem, is to identify and acknowledge the problem. Undoubtedly, industrialized human activity that is most widespread in open and coastal seas is commercial fishing. Attempting to save the oceans without addressing the threats that commercial fishing and aquafarming pose on the oceans is like ignoring the elephant in the room, because it is this industry that is inflicting damage of unbelievable scales to the oceans. After having identified this problem, one of the most powerful and effective solutions that we can be a part of would be to consciously be aware of how much seafood we consume, because the price of our seafood is not just the money that we pay at our supermarkets to buy. There is a huge environmental price that is hidden from us that our oceans bear for our seafood. As of now, none of the solutions that are being offered to us by the fishing industry are sustainably foolproof. There are many gray areas that need much testing and implementation before coming up with convincing results. Therefore, to make a conscious decision to collectively reduce our consumption of fish and seafood is something that can actually hit the nail on the head in the long run. Coincidentally, because of the malpractices happening in the waters, fish and seafood are increasingly becoming less safe for human consumption. Today, marine animals are living and breeding in toxic and unnatural environments loaded with plastic, heavy metals, and chemicals, which, when we consume, become a part of our systems. And with overexposure to them, there are major risks of various health implications that we could face, like Vibrio and foodborne infections, as well as sepsis. So, in this kind of a situation, the most powerful and effective way, as I mentioned earlier, to help our oceans, what is it that we as consumers can do? The most powerful action that we can take is to gradually and collectively, as a community, bring down the demand for fish and seafood by buying less of these products. Wherever you might be, right now. If you can reduce the consumption to half or even less than half in quantity or frequency, then it can bring massive changes to the way the oceans look right now. You might be aware of the way intensive, large scale animal agriculture impacts climate change. I have also given several talks about that, and here are some of the strategies that are stated as one of the most powerful ways to help our planet as well as oceans. Like, for example, you could go meatless one day a week or multiple days in a week, or just make one meal a day 100% plant based, or swap out cow's milk for a non dairy milk like soy or oat, or simply eat a plant rich diet or a plant rich meal or a plant based meal whenever you can. Another very interesting way would be to eat a plant rich meal at your club or district meetings, which will not only help you reduce your carbon footprint, but might also inspire others to get educated about the hidden environmental cost of our daily diets. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation. I hope you liked it. And if there are any questions, then please reach out to me at ambaree, Ambaree, at gmail.com. Thank you.